The female CEO shocked the single father. "My father died, but I never forgot what he owed you." The knock on the old wooden door came just as Daniel was finishing another exhausting day. His hands were rough from years of hard labor, his back ached, and the small house he shared with his daughter seemed quieter than ever. When he opened the door, he expected to see a neighbor or perhaps another bill collector. Instead, a luxury black car stood outside, and beside it was a young woman dressed in an elegant business suit. Her eyes were filled with emotion as she looked at him. Before we continue this unforgettable story, take a moment to like, comment, share, and subscribe to Beyond Kindness if you believe that kindness, honesty, and second chances can change lives. Your support helps bring more heartwarming stories like this to people around the world. Daniel stared at the stranger. The woman seemed successful, powerful, and completely out of place in his small neighborhood. Yet there was something in her expression that felt deeply personal. The woman slowly stepped forward. Her voice trembled as she introduced herself. She explained that she was the CEO of one of the largest companies in the state. Then she revealed something that left Daniel speechless. She was the daughter of a man he had not seen in over 20 years. Memories rushed back instantly. 22 years earlier, Daniel had been a young mechanic, struggling to build a future. He had recently married the love of his life, Emily, and together they dreamed of opening their own repair shop. Life was simple, but they were happy. One rainy evening, a desperate man walked into Daniel's small garage. His clothes were soaked, and worry covered his face. His name was Robert. He explained that he had lost nearly everything after a failed business venture. He needed help urgently. His car had broken down, and he had no money to pay for repairs. Daniel could see genuine fear in the man's eyes. Despite his own financial struggles, he repaired the vehicle without charging a single dollar. He even gave Robert money for food and fuel. Emily had questioned whether they could afford such generosity, but Daniel had smiled and said that sometimes people need hope more than anything else. Robert never forgot that kindness. A few weeks later, Robert returned. He thanked Daniel repeatedly and promised to repay him someday. He spoke about rebuilding his life and starting over. Then he disappeared. Years passed. Daniel never heard from Robert again. Meanwhile, life became far more difficult than Daniel could have imagined. A tragic illness took Emily's life when their daughter, Sophie, was only 6 years old. Overnight, Daniel became both father and mother. The grief nearly destroyed him. Some nights he sat alone in the darkness after Sophie fell asleep, wondering how he would survive another day. Money was always tight. He worked long hours repairing cars. He skipped meals so Sophie could have what she needed. He wore the same work boots for years because every spare dollar went toward school supplies, medical bills, and keeping a roof over their heads. Many people would have become bitter. Daniel never did. He taught Sophie the same values that guided his own life. He taught her to help others, even when life seemed unfair. He taught her that character mattered more than wealth. As Sophie grew older, she noticed the sacrifices her father made. She watched him leave before sunrise and return after sunset. She saw the exhaustion in his eyes, but never heard him complain. To her, Daniel was a hero, yet heroes often carry invisible wounds. Years of hardship slowly wore him down. His small garage struggled to compete with larger businesses. Debts accumulated. Equipment broke down. Customers became fewer. Eventually, Daniel was forced to close the shop he had spent decades building. The day he locked the doors for the final time felt like losing a part of himself. He found temporary jobs wherever he could. Some weeks he earned enough to survive. Other weeks he barely managed to pay the bills. Still, he continued moving forward because Sophie depended on him. What Daniel did not know was that far away, Robert had built a remarkable success story. The man whose car he repaired years earlier had eventually created a thriving company. Through determination and hard work, Robert became a respected businessman. He never forgot the struggling mechanic who had helped him during the darkest moment of his life. Robert often told his daughter, Victoria, about Daniel. Whenever Victoria asked her father what true success meant, Robert shared the story of the mechanic who expected nothing in return. As the years passed, that story became a lesson Victoria carried in her heart. Then tragedy struck again. Robert passed away unexpectedly after a brief illness. Before his death, he gave Victoria a collection of personal journals. Inside them were stories about the people who had changed his life. One story appeared more than any other, Daniel's. Page after page described how a stranger's kindness had given Robert hope when he was ready to give up. Victoria read every word through tears. One sentence stood out above all others. "I owe my future to a mechanic who believed in me when nobody else did." That sentence haunted her. She realized her father had spent years intending to repay Daniel, but had never managed to find him. Victoria made a promise at her father's funeral. She would fulfill that debt herself. The search took months. Records were incomplete. Businesses had closed. Addresses had changed. But eventually she found him. And now she stood on his doorstep. As Daniel listened to her story, emotions overwhelmed him. He barely remembered the money he had given Robert. To him, it had been a simple act of kindness. He never expected anything in return. Victoria explained that her father never considered the debt repaid. The repair, the food money, and most importantly, the hope Daniel offered had changed the course of his entire life. Then Victoria handed him an envelope. Inside was a check so large that Daniel thought there had been a mistake. His hands trembled. The amount could eliminate every debt he had. It could restore financial security. It could transform his future. Daniel immediately tried to refuse. He insisted he had done nothing extraordinary. Victoria shook her head. She explained that this was not charity. This was gratitude. This was a promise finally being honored. For several moments, neither of them spoke. The years of struggle, sacrifice, and disappointment seemed to collide in a single emotional moment. Tears filled Daniel's eyes. Not because of the money, because someone remembered. Because a small act of kindness from decades earlier had mattered. Because his belief in helping others had not disappeared into the world unnoticed. The following months brought changes Daniel never expected. He paid off his debts. He repaired his home.